Welcome to Conversations That Matter. This episode is brought to you by Odlum Brown, a client-focused investment firm that starts client relationships with straightforward conversations focused on you, your aspirations, and your investment priorities. Odlum Brown has been a supporter of Conversations That Matter from the day we started the show. Their only condition was that we provide a non-biased conversation with people from all sides of all sorts of issues. And of course, we couldn't produce this show without the support of Oh Boy Productions. And we also need your support. Please pledge $1 per show at patreon.com/conversations that matter. Those dollars add up and they play an important role in helping ensure that we get to produce this show. Now to this week's episode. As seaports on the west coast of North America, Vancouver and Prince Rupert play a vital role in the economy of the country, both for import and export. If we buy any goods from Asia, they come into the country through those ports. If Canadian producers want to sell goods to the world that are produced on the west side of the Great Lakes, most of those pass through West Coast ports. And year after year, more than 12,000 ships that require a licensed pilot on board come and go safely. The questions that currently hang over the industry in the waters of the West Coast are an increase in oil tankers and the impact all of the ships have during the 2 months when the southern resident whale population visits the Salish Sea. Then add in Bill C-48 and the impact it may have on the movement of oil-based resources, and we're left wondering, what is the state of shipping on the West Coast? We invited Kevin Obermeyer, the CEO of the Pacific Pilotage Authority, and Robert Lewis-Manning to join us for a conversation that matters about the state of shipping on Canada's West Coast, its track record, the challenges, and the opportunities.
Conversations That Matter is a partner program for the Centre for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you.
Welcome. We're talking about the state of shipping on the west coast of Canada, particularly, of course, the coast of British Columbia, the role that it has, its importance, our safety record, and where we're going from here. Because it's my sense, anyways, is that we're putting our own reputation at risk with what we're doing about managing the way that people perceive our safety record. Are we doing a good job here?
So I think we're doing an extremely good job. Mm-hmm. If you look at the safety record from the incidents that ships are involved in, it's minimal. And those, when you do have them, they are very minor incidents overall. We have one or two that are a little more than minor, but overall, we haven't had an oil spill on this coast in many, many, many years with the pilot on board. Mm-hmm. So the feeling that the world's falling and there's going to be an oil spill is just not right. We've been doing oil tankers out of Westridge Terminal for over 50 years. We have never had an incident with one of those vessels. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of regulations and rules that govern those types of vessels.
Does it make it all that more remarkable when you take a look at the nature of the coastline of British Columbia?
It is, but I think it's a testament to the level of training that everybody goes through on the pilotage on this coast. And then it's also a testimony to the marine industry. The ships that are calling on our coast now are very different from many years ago. Mm-hmm. The cruise ships are very sophisticated with lots of degradation. They can lose an engine and still carry on. There's all these layers of safety, additional layers of safety that we see on this coast, which we didn't see 10, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we have on this coast is a very different level of tug operations and tug power. We never had that 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So there are major changes that have occurred on this coast overall, but it doesn't seem to be recognized.
That causes you a bit of frustration, especially when you know the skill set that's in play with the people who are on the bridge, namely your pilots. Must be frustrating.
It is, and we go out much like Robert does. We go and we meet with communities, we talk to them, we explain what we do. Presently, we are doing the voyage of the vessel. It's a presentation where Transport Canada, ourselves and Coast Guard meet with the community and explain what happens along a ship's route all the way from Japan or Asia to one of our BC coasts. And every step along the way, there are levels of safety and there's things that these vessels have to do. We need to get that message out more eloquently because there is still a feeling on this coast. And I specify this coast because it's not the same on the East Coast. On the East Coast, you have tankers arriving on a daily basis. Nobody bats an eye. Here, any minor incident will get front page media attention.
Oh, yes,
it's
it will.
a very, very different situation. And we need to work really hard to ensure that there is an understanding that there are all these levels of safety.
From your perspective, how important is our reputation from a safety vantage point to international shippers? They know that they're going to be coming into our waters. Do they look at us as a wonderful place to be bringing their ships and cargo to? Does this reputation that's been created by the incredible work by the pilots help to make us more attractive to shipping interests?
Well, you have to be safe. So I think the sector and the safety framework, which is both part of the government's mandate and the industry's mandate, has been very successful in British Columbia, and it speaks for itself. And I actually think most people understand that, even if they're not experts in marine transportation. Sometimes that gets lost in some of the, what I would say, more contentious issues that might be happening around major projects in British Columbia and or Washington State, to be quite honest. And that sort of very complex environment often takes away that message unintentionally. But I think the success of the safety framework it speaks for itself, and it's not something that just Canada is doing. It's doing it with the United States in the Salish Sea. So that speaks to decades of experience and long-lasting relationships that sort of transcend both the government and the industry sector.
We've got competition up and down this coast, and what is the message that we're sending from here right now to shippers from Asia?
Well, it's not all about safety. So it's important. If you're an exporter or importer, a cargo owner, you're looking at the supply chain probably more than you are the safety network. You don't take for granted the safety network, you demand it, but you're going to look at the fluidity of how that cargo can move in and out of North America. And we have some mixed signals, to be quite frank. It's an interesting time period, especially in Western Canada. And sometimes I think exporters and importers look at that market as somewhat challenging. Some of those challenges are natural. You can't change bad weather in the winter in the Canadian Rockies.
Yeah. Oh,
Right?
true. Right.
You try and mitigate it as much as possible, and the railways work hard to do that, but it affects how we export commodities from British Columbia. When it comes to congestion, yes, some import cargoes have diverted to U.S. ports in the last 18 months, and we know that our importers are concerned about that. We know that their shipping partners in the marine transportation are concerned about that. I was on the phone just recently talking to the province of British Columbia, and they're concerned about that. So trying to alleviate those pressure points is going to be very important, and to send a very clear signal globally that, one, we're open for business, and two, that we can do it responsibly.
You have both touched on the point on this coast. What is it that's different about our coast versus the East Coast or the Great Lakes or even in the North? What is it that seems to be so unique about this environment that makes both of you highlight that?
I'll be really blunt. I've worked in this sector on both sides of the Rockies, and I would say that there is a lot of passion about protecting the coast in BC that is actually something that we should be proud of as British Columbians. So it means a lot more people are engaged. Tankers operate in the Great Lakes in the winter through ice.
And when you say tankers, you mean oil tankers.
I do.
Yeah.
They're chemical tankers or oil tankers. It is normal. The safety precautions are taken and they are accepted. It's industrial activity that's normal. Some of that is not normal in British Columbia, or at least it's not perceived to be normal, yet there are tankers moving in and out of the Salish Sea to both Washington State and British Columbia all the time, safely.
Yes.
and have been for decades. It is part of our supply chain. Those products that they carry are part of our everyday life, and they support other industries that operate in Canada regularly. So trying to get that message out there is, I think, our challenge. And if we can do it well, I think it will build confidence for people that maybe don't understand it as well as they could.
Kevin, from your perspective, what makes the way that you refer to this coast different than other parts of Canada? Because your objectives and your mandate, of course, is different than Robert's.
Sure. It's a complex question, it really is. But at the end of the day, what I think it boils down to, in my opinion, is that the people along this coast tend to think more locally and about their own issues as opposed to the national prerogative. Now, that might be oversimplifying it, but whenever we have a meeting when there's a new project going on and I go and speak to it about the safety of navigation, it's always about what is the effect on me personally. Now, as you know, we have not had an issue with the tanker, but there's always this what if, and if it happens, I will lose my ability to have my recreational on the water. I'm not going to be able to fish. I'm not going to be able to gather. Now, I understand all of that, but there are levels of risk, and it's no different than on the East Coast. Our weather patterns here are not different to the West Coast. Our area is no more pristine than Placentia Bay. We both areas love their coastline, love their sea, but the local attitude seems to be different. And to be honest, I don't think it's just BC. I think it's BC, Washington, Oregon, and California seem to have a different take, even though we are the gateway for trade through Canada. And to me, it's essential that we keep those gateways open. And yet more and more what we see is everybody's trying to stop the rest of the country from getting the benefits of a trade route. Vancouver, Prince Rupert, they are major gateways to the rest of Canada.
We are building them as major gateways to central and eastern United States from Asia as well. Absolutely. And so we are then sending that message to others. But if we're starting to handcuff the ability to get ships in and out, what then are the consequences?
Oh, we will lose that confidence of importers and exporters. That'll be the first consequence. And some of that will be very local, and some of that will be more related to both Canada and North America, because, as you mentioned, those are gateways to the eastern part of North America. So it's important, and that's what owners of cargo look for. They're looking for that confidence that their product is going to show up at the terminal that they're exporting when they expect it to, and it's going to be loaded promptly on a ship, and vice versa if it's an import.
Right. So if we're slowing down the movement of traffic into the Salish Sea because of noise concerns, what's the impact of doing just that?
That type of slowdown, if it's managed properly, can be beneficial. Certainly it has to be beneficial to the whale, and it can't be negative to the supply chain. So getting that right is our challenge.
Yeah.
And that's just one of dozens of challenges that are very similar in nature and important to a lot of people in British Columbia, and of course very important to the supply chain.
To both of you, what are the safety protocols around moving oil?
So I'll start. I often get asked the question, what keeps you up at night? I can tell you it's not tankers. There's other things that keep me up at night, but not tankers. Here's why. Every tanker that is loaded over 40,000 tons and moving to the harbor will have 2 pilots on the bridge. They will be draft restricted. They will have a PPU working with 1 pilot looking at the PPU and 1 doing the operation.
For anybody who doesn't know, what's the PPU?
A personal pilotage unit, which is basically a standalone electronic chart on a laptop. Okay. So if something fails on the ship electronically, they've got their navigational system.
So there's redundancy.
Exactly. Yeah. So they've got the Mark 1 eyeball, as I call it, looking out the window. You've also got this. And that system is accurate to within 1/10 of a degree. And so every ship coming through the harbour usually has at least 3 tugs, 2 on the stern, 1 on the bow. Or tethered.
Right, tethered.
And sometimes there's 2 tethered on the bow, depending on how much cargo they've got in it and the length overall in the beam. So that's in the harbour. When you get out the harbour, and there's other things like going in the maximum of 6 knots through Second Narrows. We've done 2 sets of simulations. We've done live trials. We absolutely know, without a shadow of a doubt, how to handle a vessel with a hard over rudder failure or an engine failure as we're approaching the bridge.
And those are the 2 major concerns, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Once you get out of the harbour, we will have the tugs depart, apart from 1, and we will change those 2 pilots that were on the ship, get off, and 2 new ones get on. Reason being is that you're going to have 2 pilots on the bridge from 3 miles to the north of East Point, all the way through Harrow and Boundary Pass, as far as Victoria for now. In the future, when we have TMX project on the go, they will go all the way around to Souk. So we will probably do our pilot change off Sandheads.
Right.
Because
and
you
so
need to
is
keep
that
it
to
under
ensure
8
that you're not
hours.
going to have pilots on the bridge beyond the 8-hour limit?
Correct.
Yeah.
And then so 3 miles from East Point, and when you're heading out, the tug retethers, and it stays tethered all the way to Victoria when presently the pilot gets off. In the future, it stays tethered all the way around Race Rocks, untethers at that stage, and the pilot will get off in the vicinity of Souk, but the tug will keep going all the way to J-Buoy, right out to open water.
So from an international perspective, how good is that as a protocol?
Top notch, for sure. And I'd just like to add, it's not only a safety protocol that is good for those project-related tankers, those are benefits that everybody will benefit from, because those tugs are actually traversing back and forth between Vancouver and J-Buoy. They are available, or will likely be available in the event of other emergencies or incidents, should there be any. So it's bringing a lot of capability to this coast that didn't exist before.
So what is the maximum size tanker that will be visiting Vancouver?
No different from what we've had for the last 20 years. They're called Aframaxes,
Yeah.
and that's what can get under Second Narrows Bridge.
Right. There will not be VLCCs.
They will not. No, a VLCC cannot go underneath. Absolutely not.
The room doesn't.
Physically constrained.
Yeah.
You've got 137.7 meters to get through the bridge, side to side.
Yeah.
You just physically can't do it. There is there's international requirements when you are working out channel depths, channel widths, called the P-Ank. It's what all ports use, it's what we use if it's outside of a port. And basically it is 2.87 times the beam at the moment, provided you've got tugs. So 2.87 times, let's call it 50 meters, you can't go over that. So if you get a VLCC with that length and that depth, first of all, we constrain to 13.5 meters. VLCCs need 20 meters.
Wow.
You can't do it.
So to both of you, what is the great opportunity that we could embrace if we choose to, as far as shipping here on the West Coast? What's our biggest threat to being able to realize that?
Well, I think the opportunity is unfolding in front of us. We have the expertise, we have the regulatory framework, and the commodities to sell to the world. So those 3 things together are a good combination. We do run the risk of making it overly complex, and I think trying to simplify how we manage our supply chain efficiently and safely is going to be really important to our international trading partners. And we need to spend some effort to get that right. It can often look quite confusing from the outside.
Do you think that if there was a greater understanding of what the total overall impact of shipping is on every aspect of Canadian life?
It's a huge challenge in Canada. I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I say the commercial industry itself needs to improve its ability to communicate that. But this isn't just about the ships, probably more importantly, it's about what the ships carry. And I think that connection is often lost. I live on an island. The things that I consume, they don't magically appear.
No.
They're coming from somewhere. And it doesn't matter whether you're living in Kelowna, Regina, or Victoria. Those products are being manufactured, grown, or mined somewhere, and they need to get to the consumer. And I think understanding that supply chain is I mean, I'm a geek, so I love it. But
Right.
but that might not be the case for everybody. And I
Right.
think just growing that understanding is going to be very important.
But, you know, I had both of you come in because I think that it's a combination of what you represent with the Chamber of Shipping and what you represent around our ability to move that cargo, no matter what it is, safely. How do we get that combined message out?
I think your point about ensuring that Canadians in general, and especially the West Coast Canadians, realize what being a trading nation actually means. And it's not just that I can wear my Nike shoes or have the clothes that are cheaply available from overseas. It's also the fact that we need to get our products out. If we can't get our products out, we're in the same issue.
Yeah.
You know, we are confined. And so if we're going to offer all those social services the way we do, we have a great social network. But for everybody to enjoy that social network, there needs to be trade. We don't have anything else that we can do to make money. And so there has to be ships coming and going to sell us goods and for us to sell goods. It's what we all do to make money.
And building that confidence in the safety network is part of that education. And I think it may look a little bit chaotic at the moment, especially in Western Canada, and maybe I'm being polite. But
No, you are.
Some of that chaos is probably necessary.
Yeah.
So part of that learning process is sharing all of that with coastal communities and British Columbians to better understand that. And it may look a bit messy at the moment, but I think that chaos is necessary to get to a better understanding. And hopefully we can do that smartly and relatively in a timely manner.
I think the most important thing that people who watch this program will want to know is, can you do it safely? And for, you know, the well-being of our environment, ensure that you can do that for decades to come.
And that's an absolutely reasonable demand of everybody.
Yeah,
And we can,
yeah.
but we need to show that we can.
Yeah, there's so much more that I would want to get into. You know, Bill C-48, what's the impact of that? Unfortunately, this is a complex topic, and we only get to touch on the very basic, overview of it. But I think that it's safe to say that shipping on the west coast of British Columbia, of Canada, is vitally important to everyone who calls Canada home.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, thanks for coming in and doing this.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Gary.
Thanks a lot.